thanks for clicking on this video. The painting beside me is called 3D Irises, and it's the subject of today's video. But before we get started, if you love art and you're not there now, then come over to our webpage at www.montmart.net because we have lots more lessons there, as well as our Creative Connection and our Facebook. And if you subscribe to our Creative Connection, then you get lots of hints, tips and other goodies. So let's get into it and start by creating the guide. To create the guide, I'm using 2 sheets of an A2 sketchbook attached with sticky tape. Next, we need to download the PDF so we can refer to the image of the flowers. This can be found attached to the 3D Irises lesson at Montmart TV in our website. Once the paper has been joined, the best thing to do is blue tack it onto the canvas so you can see how your flowers spatially occupy the canvas. We can then start drawing up our flowers. Now you can do this with the grid system or you can do it direct. That's the best way to do it, I think. Okay then, well, let's cut that out and we can start modelling. This is where I have to give the sharp pointy thing alert. If you're not yet an adult, then you might need to get the help of one for this stage. Once our guide has been created, we can start the modelling paste. So let's do that. This is Montmart modelling paste and it's fantastic. Depending on the size of the flower you are doing will depend on how much you need, obviously. But I use 2 tubs in my project. I'm applying it with an old concrete float. This stuff dries remarkably quickly too, considering how thick it gets applied. It can be speed dried with a hairdryer as well. Once a consistent layer is applied, I lay the guide into position and using a palette knife, I cut in around the guide and remove the excess modelling paste. I'm using a wooden modelling tool with a flat tip as well. Make sure any areas around the flower are free of modelling paste. This will ruin the 3D effect otherwise. To reinforce the 3-dimensional nature of my irises, I'm going to define the edges, and this can be done just with an incision with a hobby knife and then push them into position. Another pointy thing alert here, so be careful. As you do this, take care not to cut through the canvas too, and use that flat modelling tool to create a clean edge. Refer to the second image in the PDF to see which edges to define. Well, although that's not totally cured, it's dry enough for us to keep going. And the next step is we're going to lay an undercoat over the whole thing. And I'm using Port Wine Red in the Dimension series. So let's get our undercoat on. Use a large hog bristle brush for this. It will create bristle strokes on the surface that will look great when we dry brush on the top coat. Reinforce the direction of the petals with your strokes. Alrighty then, we can now start painting our irises. All of the colours used and the recipes to mix them are in that PDF that I was talking about before, so let's paint our irises. The PDF outlines the colours to use, how to mix them and at what ratios. It is important to get the hues correct as there is no other flower that shares these unique colours. Irises are essentially only one colour, but the way reflected light shows on these petals gives the impression that there are many tones present. This is one of the reasons they were loved by painters through the ages. Their lack of symmetry makes them a bit of a challenge to compose and draw as well. So a shape formulation cannot be used to draw them, and one must draw what is seen. If you look at Van Gogh's irises, you will see the way he intuitively handles each unique flower beautifully. So next we're going to create the eye, the yellow eye of the iris, and you just watch this pop. Nature has an amazing way of displaying colour theory in appropriate situations, as in this case, yellow and purple are opposite on the colour wheel and look great together. Well, that's the first iris done. It's best to do flower by flower because we're using acrylic paint and it dries so quickly. So just to recap, lay in your mid-tone first and then the light and the dark tone into that. If you refer to the PDF, there's a image of the finished piece so you'll know what tone to put where. So let's move on to another flower. Hello again. Well, I've left that overnight and it's well and truly cured, ready for the next step, which is to paint the background in. And I'm going to use vermilion to do that. This orangey red should really make my irises pop. So let's get this background in. This is Montmartre acrylic retarder, and as the name suggests, it retards the drying time of the paint. When mixed in the correct ratio, the paint can be blended a lot easier. But in this case, I can achieve a nice, smooth, consistent top coat. If the paint starts to partially dry and the brush comes into contact with it, it can damage the surface, causing an unsightly finish. Dry brushing is achieved by lightly dragging paint over the surface, so only the high parts of the weave come into contact with the paint. Well, once we're happy with that dry brushing, we can start the final step, which is to lay in those stems. And I'm going to use a Monastral green, which is a very bright green, and it should look great against that red, because as we know, red and green are complementary. So once you have your tube here, you just need a sharp pencil to pierce the end, like this. Well, I really hope that you enjoyed that. Like I always say, I've had a lot of fun painting it. If you haven't joined our Creative Connection yet, or our Facebook, then don't forget to do that, because we'd love to talk to you. Stay tuned, because we've got some great lessons coming up, and remember to keep on painting.